The Vampire Coast are nearly upon us, and like every DLC, there is going to be a lot to learn on how this new faction works. So in this video, we'll take a look at every single unit, talk briefly about their role and what units they may be similar to, just to help you get a better understanding of them before you go into the Vampire Coast DLC. This is of course on early access, so thanks to CA for that, and don't be surprised if you see some changes to stats or prices upon final release. Now let us begin. Our first and cheapest lord, Aranessa Saltspite. She's got good damage, good melee defense, good melee attack, armor piercing, and a bonus versus large, so she's pretty good in the melee, but she doesn't have a great deal of armor, so you do need to be a little bit careful with her. Although she does have a physical resistance. She's probably better off fighting in crowds of enemies rather than trying to take on other characters, and she does have a few nice abilities, one of which is a net that will reduce the enemy's melee defense. She can also be put on a rotting Promethean mount. Next, Luther Harkon. He is a hybrid weapon specialist. He can throw down in melee or blast things from range, and he does have a few nice abilities as well. One on both of his weapon damage that increases the miscast chance of the enemy and also reduces their physical resistance should they have one. He can also fire while moving, has regeneration, and can be put on a Terrorgeist mount. And for our first wizard, Silostra Diafin. She is a caster with the new Lore of Deep spellbook, which is pretty damn powerful, let me tell you. She is ethereal, so she doesn't have armor, but she has a mighty physical resistance, although magic can be a problem for her. She's not great in the melee, but she does have some nice abilities, one of which allows you to spawn up some ethereal cavalry. If you would like to make her more formidable in melee, you can put her on a rotting Leviathan mount. And then for some more standard lords, the Vampire Fleet Admiral, with polearm in this case, comes in 3 different varieties with the Deep, Death, or Vampire lore books at your disposal. They're also not too bad in melee for a caster, with decent armor, decent melee defense, and a good amount of weapon strength with armor piercing and a bonus versus large, so going to be good at taking on those large lords and still allowing you to bring the magic. And then we have the Vampire Fleet Admiral with a pistol. They still have the 3 different varieties with the different lore books, but it's probably capable of more damage output than the other Fleet Admiral, as it has that ranged attack which is armor piercing. It has quite a lot of weapon strength in melee, but it's not armor piercing. It has more melee attack than the other Fleet Admiral, but less melee defense. So going to be more about the offense is this one. Both Fleet Admiral types can be put on rotting Promethean mounts. And our last legendary lord, the big man himself, Count Noctilus. He's got a lot of armor and melee defense, and a nice bit of weapon strength with armor piercing and a bonus versus large. For his magic, he's got a mixture of spells including Pit of Shades, Invocation of Nehek, and the Wind of Death, amongst others. He also has regeneration, so he can be a bit of a bastard to kill. But if you want to transform him into the ultimate bastard, you'll go ahead and put him on his Necrofex mount. This just makes him disgusting. It's quite pleasing. Heroes, our first one being the Gunnery Wight. He's not fantastic in melee, but he's got a nasty little ranged attack which is armor piercing, with a decent amount of range. His deal though is that he can buff up the power of your ranged units, making them even stronger. A good one to bring along if you bring a missile heavy army, which you'll probably find yourself doing a lot. If you need something more spooky though, then go for a Morngul Haunter. They are anti-infantry, armor piercing, bonus versus infantry, regenerating, stalking, terror causing, speed slowing, piece of work. They don't have a great deal of armor or melee defense though, so they may work best mixed in with some other units. A nasty little surprise though, especially if you make good use of Stalk and Vanguard deployment. And lastly, we've got 3 different kinds of Vampire Fleet Captain, again with the 3 different laws of magic, the same ones as before. They're not too bad in melee, but they don't have a great deal of armor. Do have a nice bit of weapon strength though that's non-armor piercing, so they'll do well fighting in light crowds perhaps, but mostly they're there for your magic needs. Onto our infantry of the melee variety, Zombie Pirate Deckhands Mob. These are your cheap and not very cheerful, meat shield expendable, chaff, whatever the hell you want to call them, units. They don't have much in the way of stats, but they're going to do great at getting in the way, clogging things up, taking charges, taking some of the damage off your better units, much in the same way zombies do for the vampire counts, but this unit is twice as expensive as zombies, so don't be expecting to bring loads of them for cheap. They do cause fear though, like most vampire kind of units, and I should also mention that most units in this army are aquatic, although that is pretty much useless most of the time, especially for a unit that has 23 speed, like these deckhands. But for an extra bit of gold, you can get yourself the polearm version, who are a bit more useful as they have more melee defense and are anti-large and armor piercing. So again, they serve the same role as the previous unit, but they're a little bit more useful as they're anti-large and again can just get in the way. Going to be more use against those factions with a lot more large units or more dangerous large units, just giving you that extra little bit of damage that could help wear down the enemy. And for our first Regiment of Renowned unit, the Tide of Skilled are just the regular deckhands mob with slightly improved stats, Frenzy, and Perfect Vigor. How much use that really is, I'm not sure, but again a similar role to the previous two units. And for an ethereal unit, we have the Sirens. A similar unit to Cairn Wraiths, they're ethereal and have the physical resistance of course, they have magical attacks, armor piercing, and an ability that reduces the enemy melee attack. They cause terror of course, and I should mention a common theme with most of the units in this roster is that they do have very low leadership. But of course they don't rout, they just crumble away once their leadership gets too low. Overall the Sirens, a nice armor piercing damage dealing unit, a good one for helping support with those elite heavily armoured enemy troops. Speaking of the heavily armoured elite troops, here's the Depth Guard. They are Berserker Axe Infantry, they got a ton of killing power on them, great weapon strength, great melee attack, no armor piercing though, Frenzy, Regeneration. Their downsides though, they don't have a great deal of melee defense and their unit size is pretty small. So again, they're very much a supporting unit, mix them in with your deckhands mob so they can support each other. Depth Guard can do the killing while the zombies can take the smashing. Going to be great against those lesser armoured factions, the Greenskins, Beastmen, Skaven. They do have a pretty hefty price tag though, so don't expect to be fielding armies of these boys. If you're expecting some strong large units to come your way though, you may want to bring the Polearm variant. Very much the same deal, they're just armor piercing and anti-large, similar to Chaos Warriors with halberds perhaps, but again their small unit size means you'll probably want to mix them in with other troops. And our final infantry, the Bloody Reaver Deck Guard. The same as the previous unit, just with slightly improved stats, but they do have an ability which gives them 44% damage resistance, which is pretty huge and is going to be very useful against those elite monsters and cavalry. On to what the Vampire Coast are all about then, they're ranged units. First up, the Zombie Pirate Gunnery Mob. They are shit in melee, so don't... try again. They are not very good in melee, so very similar to the original deckhands crappy mob, but this one can at least shoot something. It doesn't have a great deal of range though, but it can fire whilst moving. How much use that is on a unit with 23 speed, I'm not so sure. They're going to be of similar use to the regular deckhands melee mob, but at least they can shoot something, maybe do a little bit of kiting before they get engaged, so worth it if you want to spend the extra money for a little bit of potential extra damage. And then Zombie Pirate Gunnery Mob Bombers, very similar to the previous unit. They are even more scheisse in melee though, but of course that's not really what they're for. The bombs are a great way to disrupt enemy charging formations, whether that's infantry or cavalry, whoever, and they will seem to keep throwing them even if your enemies are engaged with your infantry. So you can bomb the crap out of your own crappy deckhands mob, but it's fine because you'll be getting that extra bomb damage. A nice disruptive option. Now for a little bit more of a legit unit, Zombie Pirate Gunnery Mob with handguns. These are very similar to handgunners for the Empire. They've got a good amount of range with okay missile damage, but it is armor piercing, and I should also mention that all of these missile units have a trait which makes them more damaging with their first few shots of their ammunition. So all these units are going to be that little bit more powerful than their stats suggest on the first few shots of their weapon. Of course this unit great for gunning down many things, mainly armored troops or large troops perhaps. Going to be very useful in many situations. And for the fourth time, Zombie Pirate Gunnery Mob, as if they couldn't think of any other names for their fucking units. These ones have hand cannons, literally. It's a giant cannon that they hold on their hands, doesn't have a great deal of range, but it does do a nice bit of damage. They're listed as anti-infantry, but I've actually found them myself to be a much better anti-large unit. Because they only have 90 range, it means they can't really do a lot of damage to infantry before it gets engaged, and then they get obstructed. So large units are a good target for this one, and if you haven't picked up on the reoccurring theme yet, they're not very good in melee. So like all these missile units, you've got to make sure you protect them. And to a unit now that I think are going to be pretty big in the multiplayer world, and a lot of people are going to like them, Deck Gunners. I'm going to go ahead and compare them to Ushabti with great bows, as they have 245 range, which is pretty huge, as well as a good bit of armor piercing missile damage, which comes with the shield breaker ability, reducing missile parry chance. So these boys can do a ton of damage to pretty much anything from a good way away. Heavily armoured cavalry, heavily armoured infantry, monsters, flying units, you name it, they can hammer away at it. A very versatile, very powerful unit. And now for another regiment of renown, the Black Spot are gunnery mob with handguns. Interestingly, they're kind of also an anti-large unit. Their melee stats are slightly improved but still not great, but they do have a charge defense, the bonus versus large, and armor piercing, so they may do okay defending themselves against light cavalry like mounted yeomen or Illyrian reavers, provided they can get a bit of missile fire on them first. Don't expect them to be taking down dragon princes anytime soon though. And our last unit, a regiment of renown again of the deck gunners. These are ethereal deck gunners, as you can see, no armor but the physical resistance, magic attacks which is very nice on their ammo, and they also come with spooky bullets, which means they'll reduce the leadership of their target by quite a lot, which is going to be very powerful when coupled with the fear ability of most units, terror, any flanking that's going on. So these boys are going to be great at doing everything the normal deck gunners can do, and they're also going to be very supportive, using their leadership debuff to help your units win their fights so they can do some damage as the enemies rout away. And because they're ethereal, they'll probably survive that little bit better. So Shade Wraiths, the even better deck gunners. Now for the monsters, starting off with some familiar faces. Felbats, these are just your regular old Felbats that you probably already know about and know how to use, great for disruption. Yeah. Scurvy Dogs, again these are just the same as any other Warhound unit, great for eating missiles and chasing skirmisher cav and stuff, but they do have Vanguard deployment, which is always nice. Now for a new face, and what a pretty face it is indeed. The Bloated Corpse is a very unique unit in his own right. Long story short, he's a suicide bomber. You charge him in, he explodes and destroys pretty much any single unit. His stats are kind of irrelevant. Whatever unit he blows up is done for, pretty much. The trouble with him though is that he doesn't have much health, so arrows, missiles, artillery, magic spells could easily take him down. Factions that don't have missiles or have crappy missiles could be in trouble though. You could try hiding him in some trees, and you can even cast stalk spells on him to make him invisible, so maybe that could work. An interesting little unit, something very different. Now if you said to me, Zerk, look, I need more from this army. I need a part crab, part man, part cannon, part octopus, part fish, part corpse, part wooden-legged unit, or I'm out of here. I'd say, whoa, hold up. Animated hulks, my friend. They're an anti-infantry monster unit with a nice bit of weapon strength, which is armor piercing. Their troubles though are that they have little melee defense and little armor, so they really need support of some expendable units around them just to take some of the damage off them, otherwise they go down pretty quick. Similar to Croxagors perhaps, just less tanky. They perhaps benefit greatly from a buff that boosts their melee attack and melee defense to make them a little more useful. In a similar vein, you have Mourngols, and these I think are the closest thing you have to a cavalry. They're a little bit quicker than most of the other monsters. They're armor piercing, they've got a bonus versus infantry, they have stalk, they have regeneration, so they've got some nice things going on. They cause terror as well. But much like the animated hulks, they have the same problems: low armor, low melee defense. They're going to take damage pretty quickly unless they're supported by other units. I think where their strength really lies though is in the fact that they have stalk and vanguard deployment, so they can be a really sneaky unit, great for ambushes, or even just defending your flanks or something. The enemy won't know they're there until they get pretty close, so they could be a nice little surprise to boost your defenses. And now for a spooky raw unit in the Night Terrors, who are just fancy Mourngols. They're pretty much just buffed in their stats, but quite significantly. They've got a nice amount of leadership, even more weapon strength, some melee defense, a nice bit of extra melee attack, but they do go into rampage, so you do have to be a little bit more careful with their positioning. Should be pretty good at smashing some elite infantry, especially if it's a cheeky surprise. Crabs. I've got crabs for you. Rotting Prometheans are basically crabs that are very tanky, lots of armor, lots of melee defense, a great holding unit. They can dish out a bit of damage as well with armor piercing weapon strength, which is pretty high. Overall, a great unit for holding the front line. Mix them in with some zombies, they can help that front line stay steady so that your missile units behind don't get absolutely smashed. Like a lot of these monster units though, they have low leadership, which can be problematic, so having some healing on standby or leadership buffs could be very useful to help them fight that little bit longer. And like I keep mentioning, mix them in with other troops to help take the damage pressure off them. Onto some flying beasts with deck droppers. They're a flying pistol cavalry with a nice bit of missile damage, but there isn't a great deal of them in the unit. They're also pretty rubbish in melee, so you don't want to get them into any kind of melee fight. Maybe they could take down an artillery if they're lucky. Good for harassing and maybe whittling down some lightly armoured units, but do be wary of missiles because their lack of armour will get them dropped quick. And then we've got the bomber version of the deck droppers. Very much the same unit, but of course they drop bombs, so a lot more disruption from all the explosions, which is great for breaking up formations of units and making a bit of a mess of them. Maybe okay at stopping charges. Going to want to target those lighter units though, as their bombs aren't that powerful. And then we've got deck droppers with handguns. These are a bit more useful. They've got a good amount more range, a nice bit of missile damage, which is armor piercing. So again, going to be a great harassing unit, able to stay out the way in the air, provided they can avoid missiles. They'll be able to whittle down some heavily armored cavalry or monsters. So a typical sort of skirmish cav, except they're in the air. And the last variant is the Regiment of Renown version, the Salt Lord Scuttlers. They're the bomber version of the deck droppers, and they have armor sundering and armor piercing on their bombs. So going to be a great support unit against those elite infantries perhaps, but still very much the same role as the other deck droppers. Crabs again, this time Rotting Promethean Gunnery Mob. In melee, they're actually exactly the same as the melee version, but this one just has a couple of little undead dudes on its back with hand cannons, who can dish out a nice bit of extra damage to your nearby enemies at a short range. Still going to be useful for holding those front lines, but being able to dish out a little bit of missile damage now. Or they could defend the flanks and use that missile range just a little bit before they hold up on a flank. And there's a swanky version of them too, the Lamprey's Revenge. Same deal as the previous unit, but now they have regeneration as well as an expert charge defense. The other kinds of units only had a charge defense against large. They've got a few improved stats, but overall still the same deal as the previous two Rotting Promethean units. That's enough for crabs. How about a Necrofex Colossus? If you're into shipwrecks and stuffing loads of dead bodies inside them, he might just tickle your fancy. He's not only a giant single large unit, he's also an artillery as well, as he does have 4 cannons strapped to one of his arms. And he is a very powerful one at that. A ton of missile damage, which is armor piercing, pretty good range on it too. Good weapon strength in melee as well, which is armor piercing, but doesn't have great melee defense or leadership, so he's not fantastic in melee. Probably do alright against lighter, cheaper troops, but heavy elite troops or anti-large troops, he's going to want to watch out for. Best used as an artillery, which can fire on the move as well. If you prefer your corpse-filled shipwreck a little more toasty though, here be the Gallows Giant, the raw version of the Necrofex. He's of course a very similar deal, but now he has fire attacks and an ability that will reduce enemy leadership. He has a whopping 300 more damage now, but the armor piercing is not so much. Both these units also have an ability which allows you to spawn up a unit of deckhands mob when it drops below 50% health. Both of these are very powerful ranged units, going to be useful in pretty much any army. The Gallows Giant could be a little bit more use against those fire weak factions. But if you really do just prefer crabs, then the Rotting Leviathan is the ultimate master super crab. Very similar to the Arachnarok, I think. 150 armor, good amount of melee defense, lots of weapon strength, which is armor piercing, and the range attack, which is pretty good range on it, which is also armor piercing as well. So plenty of damage this thing can put out. It's terror causing as well, like lots of these units. Potentially a very powerful unit in the right situations. It's going to be very susceptible to missiles because it is huge, so you've got to watch out for those. If there's no missiles on the field, enemy armies are going to have a tough time bringing down this big lunk of crab. Of course though, he is pretty darn expensive. And our last monster is the Death Shriek Terrorgeist. Very much your usual Terrorgeist, but he's not anti-large now, he's just straight up heavy armor piercing power. He also causes poison of course, regeneration, got a breath attack. But great for making a play for air superiority, getting down after those heavily armoured units, doing some damage to them, poisoning them, supporting your troops with that poison as well potentially. Got some terror you can use. Of course though, leadership is a problem, just like the regular Terrorgeist, so do be careful with them. And lastly, for our artillery, first up the mortar, pretty much your standard mortar. Decent range, nice damage, although not armour piercing, so you're going to be better off targeting those lighter troops. Yeah, it's a mortar. Same deal with the Carronade, however the hell you say it. It's an armor piercing cannon with some nice damage and great range, and like all of these missile units, they do extra damage, these artilleries, on their first few volleys, so going to be extra power in those first few shots, so pick your targets wisely. But if you want to follow in Oppenheimer's footsteps and blow things up properly, then Queen Bess is the lady for you. She's absolutely huge. If you look at the undead behind her, you can see how small they are in comparison to the cannon. She is absolutely huge. She hits like a truck. Armor piercing missile damage, which reduces the speed and charge speed of anything she hits for 10 seconds. Her ammo is on fire. She just does an arse ton of damage. But as you might expect, you'll be emptying your pockets to court this lady. So there you have the entire Vampire Coast roster. Hopefully this will help you understand them a little bit better when you get into them yourself. This will be part of my main faction guide, which will come out in a couple of weeks once I know them myself a little bit better. But I do have another video that just came out the same time as this one, which is just talking about their playstyle and what I've learned playing them so far and how they work. So again, just trying to help you understand them, as it is very daunting when a new faction comes out. There's so much to learn, you don't know what anything is, it's very difficult. So hopefully I can help you with these videos just to make it a little bit easier for you. I hope you've enjoyed this, thanks for watching, I'll see you in the future, bye! Ah, one of you who watches videos to the end, have a little treat, my friend. Enjoy the unit prices.